Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks everyone for joining us. This is really wonderful, and I'm delighted to do a webinar today with two of our wonderful members of our customer success team, Emily and Roz. So thank you so much for joining us, Emily and Roz.
Hello, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure. Do you want to just introduce yourselves very quickly? Roz, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it's lovely to meet you all. I'm Roz, or Rosalind, and yeah, I'm a customer success manager at Appraised. Been doing this here for just over 6 years. So yeah, we'll be talking you through some things today on how not to do performance reviews from what we've learned over the last 6 or so years.
Perfect. Yes, Emily?
Yes, hi, my name's Emily. I've been at Appraised for almost, I think my 4-year mark will be on the 4th of June, so very, very soon. And yeah, really excited to jump into this topic and give you some advice.
Brilliant. Thank you both. And yeah, any customers that we have on this call already will know either Emily or Rosalind, I'm sure, or one of our other CS team. They'll know how experienced you guys are, and you've seen it all. I think it's fair to say, isn't it? And I think one of the things that is really interesting is about having when you've worked with a customer over a number of years, you've seen the transition that they've made over what they imagined at the beginning, how they might do performance reviews and performance management in general, where they wanted it to get to, and how long it's taken them, or what mistakes they may have made, or how they've changed things when they joined Appraised and so on. So it's really great to have your input and stories here. So hopefully you'll be able to share some real live anecdotes, confidentially or anonymously rather, and just give the benefit of your expertise. So thank you very much. For those of you who don't know, I am the founder of Appraised, and I set the company up about 12 or 13 years ago to tackle this this kind of what seemed to be a sort of everlasting problem of people complaining about appraisals, the old school appraisal. And it would just people kept complaining about them, but they could never quite get rid of it completely. And that's because, and that's for a very good reason, which is that performance reviews and performance management and performance development and discussions are so important. They're more important than ever, because people want to get ahead, and they individuals want to get the feedback that's going to help them progress, going to help unlock their potential. And performance management, in our view, is the method that unlocks someone's potential. And so that is why employees really want these conversations. But sometimes the conversation and that really important bit of value can get a little bit lost, and it ends up evolving, despite the very best of intentions from senior leaders and from HR, sometimes get a little bit lost, and you end up with a process that actually ends up serving something else a bit more. Like it serves the organization to know where people are on a 9-box grid, or get some data so that I can go in a file, or whatever it is. And so what we've tried to do with Appraised, and this is what I set out to do, is to try and create a system that gives just as much value to the employees themselves, and so that they feel like this is a great system and this is a great process. Anyway, that's enough about me. Oh, except to add that Appraised is now part of the Talos 360 family. Almost certainly know Talos has a fantastic applicant tracking system. And one of the things that we've been talking about is when you, as an employee or a candidate, you go through the hiring process from the very first time that you see a job ad on, hosted by Talos, through the hiring process, through your interviews, you get a great experience with Talos. And then what sometimes happens is they'll join the organization, and suddenly they might have a great onboarding experience. So, they'll get their laptop, they'll get their pass, they'll know where the coffee machine is. But then actually over the next few days, that sort of attention can kind of dry out a little bit. The manager has gone off to hire other people, interviewing new things, priorities have changed, and so on. We realize that actually what you want is to get someone's expectations and their performance, their engagement and motivated started off at a really high level and maintain that throughout the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 180 days, and in fact for the whole lifetime at the organization. And that's why we think Appraise and Talos coming together makes such a good match. Anyway, I'm happy to talk more about that another time. So let's talk about performance reviews and how not to do them. So we're going to go through this in a structured format. We've sort of had a big chat internally. We've talked about what are the top mistakes that people make or that we've seen. And again, this is always with the best intentions, okay? But we have seen a number of recurring mistakes that organizations made or have made before they come to us, for example. And we're going to go through that, starting with, well, ending up with probably the biggest, what we see as the biggest mistake. We'd love to hear your thoughts as well, though. And then at the end, we're also going to show you our form library, which actually we should maybe big this up a bit. It's more than a form library. It's a set of templates, guidance, and sort of best practice that can be adopted really quickly. You know, if you're thinking about you want to redo performance management, performance reviews in your organization, and you're starting with a blank sheet of paper, that can be quite a daunting task to think, right, how should we do this? And it can be very difficult to get consensus. Well, if you look at our form library, which we'll show you later, that will give you a really good starting point. Okay, and then we've got time for Q&A as well. Right, let's crack on. So I'm going to dive first straight away with the first one. Now, out of you two, which of you would like to pick this one to talk about? Because I'm sure you've both come across this.
Yeah, I can go first. So yeah, number 10, our first one that we're kicking off with is being scared of change. So we, you know, as a team, we're heavily involved in collaborating with HR teams on changing their process and discussing that with them. And we know that it can be like a super daunting task, you know, and just it's a very human thing to be scared of change and ambivalent, and that it can be overwhelming. And sticking with the status quo can often seem like the much easier option. But I think in the long run, it isn't necessarily, and there's a lot of positive that can come out of evolving your process and really kind of examining it, and not being scared of changing things. And I think it's normal as well that that you in HR may feel quite responsible for if your employees, you know, maybe are complaining about your process or raising kind of issues, or they're not happy with things, and that can also be overwhelming. It's really positive to kind of embrace that and see what you can do. And it's a perfect time, really. Like if you are implementing something like, you know, new performance management software, or wanting to kind of make that change, it is perfect timing to kind of really evaluate what you're doing and use that transition as a chance to rethink what's working and what's not working, and embrace those changes and use that kind of fresh system as a fresh start, really, kind of aligning those two things at the same time.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've certainly seen is that, you know, I think people do get worried that people are going to come up and complain, saying, "Oh, you've changed the system again, or we've changed the process, or the format is different," you know. But actually, nobody minds it when it's an improvement. And so, and it generally will be, and we'll come and talk about how the evolution of the process in a minute. But yeah, we often find, right, that managers will come up to HR and say, "Oh, this is actually so much better. We should have done this last year or the year before."
Yeah. And I think it's also really important that sort of as HR don't feel like you're doing it alone, and that is sort of all on you. And just finding those allies across the organization that are open to new ideas, like the idea of this change. And so when there's pockets of conversation happening around the organization where you're not in the room, you know that you've got those advocates in those spaces who can reinforce the benefits and say, actually, this is a big change, but the improvements are X, Y, and Z. And you, as a direct report, will benefit in this way. As a manager, you'll have these types of conversations. So just finding those advocates and allies within the organization is super beneficial when change is occurring. So you just know that when you're not in the room, you know that those people are very much reinforcing the positives of that change.
Yeah, getting some champions is always really helpful. Okay, very good. Okay, that leads us quite nicely on, actually, because I want to talk about not evolving the process. So we talked about being scared of change and changing the process. Okay, but actually what we're talking about here is making that change continuous. So you don't just say, okay, right, we reviewed it and we're going to now do this, but to continually do that over time. So that means like getting feedback from managers, getting feedback from employees. How did you find it? What should we do? What can we do differently next quarter or second half of the year? And I think in the past, perhaps it's been difficult to evolve the process, partly because of the technology, like if you're using an HRIS that's been set up in a certain way, sometimes it can be really hard to change that because they're not that flexible, or you don't want to have to kind of dig up all the Word forms, change them, or email them off to everybody and say, actually, no, we're using version 3 now. So I think that's why evolution has been, there's been friction in that process. But that is such a shame, because the fact is business priorities are changing. The company, your organization might change structure, new priorities. You've got to continue to make sure that the process is evolving and that it's relevant for what it is today, what the organization needs today. And it's okay for it to change and evolve over time. Obviously we saw that during COVID. We saw a sudden rush to loads of working from home check-ins, for example. And what our clients found worked previously just didn't work anymore. So they had to evolve. And I think it's really important to kind of have that as a general mindset with this. What you're not going to hear, I'm afraid, on this call is us saying, you should do it like this. You should do quarterly reviews and blah, blah, blah. So we're not saying that. What we're saying is we do have some ideas, some best practices, but it's really important to listen to what managers and teams are saying about the process and refining it, evolving it over time.
And I think as well, like communicating it out to everyone is just super important in terms of getting people on board, and not like kind of what you said about the last point in terms of like people not minding if it's a positive change. And again, if they know like the why something's changed or why it's been evolved, and then they're much more likely to be like, oh yeah, no, this makes sense, I can get on board with this, and it's cool. And that'll really helps as well. I think I had a client who kind of they were doing quite a traditional like annual review process, and they were like, this isn't working for us anymore. Like we've got our goals and are changing way too often for it to make sense that we just set like an annual goal for people, and they work on it the whole year and it doesn't really change. And they were like, this is really not working for us anymore. And they transitioned to kind of properly quarterly process where all their goals are set quarterly and they review them every quarter, set their new ones for the next quarter. And everyone's just found it so much easier to engage with, because it kind of just reflects what they need to do, and it it kind of aligns with their day-to-day work a lot better. So it's been good.
Great. Okay. What about this one, Emily?
Yeah, I can jump into here. So yes, not communicating effectively with staff. So sometimes the failure to communicate your new process may sort of lead to some obstacles, and employees and managers are unsure what is expected of them. So you might implement this new process, but then they have no idea what's about to come, how to utilize the process, what are they benefiting, what value can they get from it, and then also HR then can experience multiple inquiries, maybe about the same thing, or different areas, and this can lead to a lot of confusion and then disengagement in the process. And we know that also HR are extremely busy, and so you want to decrease those inquiries due to the clear communication that was set prior to and during the implementation of this new process. I do feel that sort of employees don't want to feel like performance management is being done to them, that they have some sort of voice, that they feel like they're involved in the process, and they really can clearly understand the benefit of this process and how it can support them in their career development, but also in their conversations with their managers. And also making sure that your communication is really clear with line managers, like how does it benefit them, managing their whole team, and how best this process is actually supporting their direct reports and getting the most out of them. As Roly mentioned, performance management can really help employees, or sort of management and HR really see the potential in direct reports, or see the areas where an employee needs further support or guidance. So yeah, I really think communicating it in an effective way, and ensuring that that communication is done prior to implementing the process, during, and also after it's been implemented.
Emily, question for you then. Do you ever find that your clients use sort of marketing techniques to try and get the kind of communicate effectively in a sort of modern way, rather than just a sort of big memo to everyone? Do you ever find anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Myself and Richard, who's our head of customer success, had a client who launched with us just under a year ago, and they worked alongside the marketing team. So one, ensuring the branding and how it just looked, it felt really familiar to everyone, but they really did sort of communicate and strategize the comms that were being sent out to individuals, which we saw a big benefit from. And they were quite a large organization as well, so they really wanted to get it right. They wanted to ensure that there was no sort of disengagement or people getting really confused by this new process, because previously it was a little bit clunky before they implemented Appraised. So yeah, having the support from marketing was extremely influential and positive.
Yep, great. And I should say that obviously, we are talking from our experience of Appraised, but hopefully these principles can be applied to however you choose to run your performance management process. Okay, Roz, what about this one?
Yeah, so probably not very popular, this one, but we've included it anyway, which is because unfortunately it does come up more than probably anyone would like it to, but it's the kind of not like SLT or HR or both kind of not leading by example in their own performance, like more kind of engaging and completing their own performance reviews, or those for their team, having those regular check-ins if that is something that you've decided is important for the company and the process, giving feedback, engaging and all of that, and completing more formal reviews on time, all of those kind of elements. Unfortunately, it's often like SLT are like the busiest people, and they have so much going on that it can slip through, and it's it's very hard, I think, especially if you don't address this early on. It's very hard to then kind of change those maybe slightly bad habits later on, if you start realizing, oh no, this is causing us issues in the sense that employees are getting disengaged because they look kind of above them, and then they see that the senior people that they're kind of looking to aren't actually doing what they are saying is important, and then they might start disengaging and being like, okay, well, why should we do this either, or that it starts being seen as that kind of tick box exercise that I think HR don't want. We don't want that people to start seeing performance management like that. And so it's just, I think, just kind of acknowledging that this could happen and trying to tackle it early on before it starts having a real negative impact.
You can see if as a direct report, if you've completed your self-assessment, you've taken that time to really think about what you want to discuss with your line manager, and then when you've progressed and you're ready for what your manager wants to speak to you about, and they haven't actually participated in the process at all, there's been sort of no proactivity, that will massively decrease engagement from the employees, and they're less likely want to participate in the process. They'll then start the benefits are not being felt by the employee, and so yeah, that disengagement in the entire process can most definitely increase and have sort of a negative impact on performance management as a whole.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Number 6. Okay, so this is about what happens when the process becomes too generic, or it's the same applied to everyone. And actually, something you just said just made me think of this, because sometimes what we do is we think it's really important that we have consistency up and down the organization and everywhere. But that can sometimes make things just sort of lowest common denominator, and it becomes a bit generic. And sometimes we find that the leaders, we're just going back to the previous point that you made, you know, the leaders aren't doing it because actually they know that some of the questions on the form or the part of the process actually doesn't matter to them, so they're sort of going through the motions. And the solution to that is to only have things on there that do matter, that really do matter, because there 100% are things that matter to senior leaders and that they are measured on, and it is extremely important. It's just that sometimes we're not sort of honest about that almost in those senior reviews. And so when you end up with a process that's very consistent or a bit generic, then that's when it can suffer, and people will feel like, well, this isn't quite right for me. And so if you can tailor this and personalize the experience for different groups of people, you get so much better engagement. And again, this is hard if you're doing this on paper, and it's a lot of admin to send things out at different times to different people and all that kind of stuff. So a system does help here, but whatever you're doing, I think if you can say, right, with these salespeople, they should be having their monthly KPI meetings. That's it. That's really what they care about. We don't need to talk about values every week. Let's do that, at a different cadence. Or for in HR, actually, we do kind of mainly project work. So let's focus on objectives that have been set, and let's do that. And we do that on a quarterly basis because we do the OKR model, for example. So being able to kind of tweak it to suit different groups of people is really important to get that kind of buy-in. I don't know, Emily, if you've got any thoughts on that.
Well, you mentioned sales. So actually, a client of mine, when they first sort of launched Praise, they very much had that performance management for everyone. And so the frequency and the types of conversations and questions were the same for everyone. And my client started to see that actually the sales team were quite disengaged in the process. It sort of trickled off after sort of 6 months. And they were a little bit unsure as to why there was that sort of lack of engagement. And so they reached out to the sales team and realized that it was mostly because they just didn't feel that there was any relevance. They didn't feel like the questions that were being presented to them had much benefit to them. And so the HR team sat with the head of the sales team, collated information and feedback from the employees, and customized it to make it more relevant to the sales department. And from there, the engagement increased. So yeah, just getting that feedback and just ensuring that it's not, as I said earlier, the performance management isn't just being done to everyone. It's more what are we receiving back? What's that feedback? Shall we be proactive? And if so, let's ensure that is relevant to the correct employees and that they do feel that they're getting the most out of it. Rather than being sort of forced to have conversations that they just don't feel are relevant, maybe at that time with their line manager.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, number 5.
So yeah, this is kind of the opposite of the last one, but also very relevant. So this is more about kind of starting simple and really evaluating what the kind of core process is that you would like, before getting too excited about like all of the potential things that you could do. It also links back to the first point of the being scared of change, and if you are worried about that, or worried about your employees being overwhelmed if you do too much at once, it does help to just start really simple, focus on what the essential bits of what you need the performance management process to look like at your company, and just do that to start with, and you can add on all of the other stuff later, once people have settled in and they feel confident, they know what they're doing, and you've got engagement. And it also, going back to the point about I think when we were talking about marketing and how to like get people excited about what's coming, and it can also work well with that, because you can rather than kind of doing here's everything at once and then you've got nothing really to like add on later, if you keep some exciting things back that you do want to do, but you don't kind of tell people necessarily, or you tell them that they're coming but they're not there yet. We see that a lot with, say adding on kind of more feedback functionality or recognition that it's not necessarily like, the kind of core part of, doing an annual review or whatever it might be. And you can get people excited, they're like, in 6 months time, they'll get this new thing. And yet they don't need to worry about doing everything at once, getting used to everything at once. And kind of a more specific element of this is also around, if you are redesigning your templates, your annual review templates, your mid-year review templates, and looking at, those questions that you might want to ask. Like we said in the last point, about thinking about, like what questions suit which parts of your company, what people need, what they want to focus on, is to just kind of, again, keep it as short as you possibly can. Really look at if there's like redundant questions you can get rid of, if you're repeating anything, because we find that it's like probably one of the most common things that we see when people aren't engaging is because they think that, that they're being asked to kind of write the same thing over and over again. And like we see sometimes in like someone might say, see my answer above in a response, which is, they clearly think they've already answered it and they don't want to say it again. And you can kind of look at those things and then just get rid of them because they're clearly not kind of they're not needed.
You made me think of something, which is that quite often an organization will think, okay, we're doing annual reviews, that we're sending out these forms to people, and actually, look, wouldn't it be great at the same time to capture information from managers that we can use for succession planning or talent profiling, such as whether, maybe using a 9-box grid or finding out who's in a critical role, all that kind of stuff. And so it sort of gets bolted on, and that's fine, except sometimes it can have the effect of slowing the whole process down, because giving the manager more things to do and to make sure they feel like they've got it right, that can then, and they might want to check something before they actually end up having the meeting with the employee and so on. So actually what you can do is you can break some of these things down into smaller parts and do them at different times of year, or or run them separately or side by side or whatever. And actually that can really make it feel much more kind of bite-sized and manageable from an employee's point of view, and ensure that, like I said at the very beginning, the value remains with the manager and the employee. This is a useful conversation. Yes, it's useful data for HR, but we've got to preserve this feeling for employees that this is about them and developing them and helping them get the best out of themselves, so that they kind of progress and they enjoy what they're doing and are feeling like they're going places. Okay.
Oh, I'll take this one. Designing a process to suit HR rather than the business. So we absolutely appreciate that HR is often the driving force behind performance management process and ensuring that it's implemented and supported throughout the organization. But we really feel for it to be successful is one, to ensure that performance management aligns with the organization's strategic goals, but also the people strategy. And as we've mentioned, it's sort of a bit of a theme, is trying to ensure that you're listening to what do employees want to get out of it and what do managers want to get out of it. What wasn't working previously? What do we need to change, and how can we evolve it to support the changes in the business, changing in the teams and departments and so forth? And so as an employee, you can start to see your perspective and your voice literally being shown within the performance management process and saying, they've listened to me, and I can see that they are wanting to be proactive and ensuring that performance management is about my progression and my sort of objectives and working with the organization. So yeah, it's just really just trying to ensure that there is this sort of collaboration between different people in the organization, rather than just HR thinking, we think this will be good, let's implement it. However, I will do a bit of a caveat, is that we do appreciate that there are specific processes and questions that are necessary, such as compliance and audits. So we do understand that there are sort of necessities in performance management, but it's just trying to find that balance where you're having those sort of continuous conversations alongside potential sort of compliance conversations as well. And something else that we do see with clients, especially again when they're looking to evolve their process, is really seeking that feedback. And I've just sort of mentioned that, but really trying to reflect on it, be proactive on it, and this can really foster higher engagement throughout the process itself.
I think, yeah, including like a really good cross section of employees across your kind of hierarchy is really vital. Like it's often, the first port of call might be to talk to your SLT about goals for the business and making sure they're considered in designing the process. But it also just works really well to involve people from like different departments and then different kind of seniority levels. Some kind of specific examples we've seen are people doing employee surveys about what people want out of a process, kind of company town halls, like putting together little steering groups. We've seen quite a lot of our clients kind of gather a kind of group of people who are quite engaged and have a lot of ideas about what they want to see with performance management, and get them really involved in trying it out, like test if you're thinking about doing something, can you get that feedback really early on, and you can kind of develop it with them, so that again, it, as we've said, it makes people feel like they're involved and they've got a voice, and you also get guidance. I guess you're not on your own, like you're not isolated trying to figure it out. You've got support as well.
Not supporting the technology. So I think what we're getting at here is that, in our view, we think the technology is a huge enabler of these conversations, and like I said at the beginning, that relationship between the employee and the line manager that I think is so crucial. And we've designed a system that we think can improve that relationship and configured in the right way and not making any of those other mistakes that we talked about earlier, can really change behaviors, change habits. However, it can just do so much more. It can be so much more powerful when it's supported correctly offline, if you like. And what you'll find is that you've got maybe, I don't know, 40% of managers, when you give them a new tool like this, let's say, they will pick it up and run with it, and they'll love it, and they'll just go in and they'll do everything, and they will start having more regular check-ins. They'll have more one-to-ones. They'll update their objectives. Other people might be a little slower to adopt it, or they don't necessarily get it, or they immediately. And so, building some other support around it can also go a really long way. It doesn't have to be a huge amount, right? It could just be a little bit of training, some guidance, a really nice kind of series of communications throughout the rollout. So I think am I right in thinking, Emily, you have templates, for example, communications templates. We talked about the sort of marketing approach earlier, but you can do a sort of drip feed, right, of information. Say, hey, guys, why don't you try this today? Now, a week later, try that.
Yeah, so well, I have a client of mine who was sort of slightly assuming that managers knew how to have good conversations. So during the check-ins, reflecting on objectives, setting the objectives, and realised that managers were getting a little bit fearful and just weren't really sure if they were ensuring that the value was occurring during those touch points with their direct reports. And so what you can do in Appraise is during a check-in, you can actually create like a hidden function or hidden area. In that area were just some prompts of questions that the manager could ask. So it was just a little bit of a guidance piece. So if that manager was unsure as to what to ask, wanted to ensure that there was a value being brought into that conversation, that it wasn't just a how are you doing, you're doing great, okay, great, let's move on. It was just ensuring that that manager just had a little bit more guidance and sort of knew how best to guide that conversation, just to ensure that that sort of touch point was of value to both of them. And in a minute, Rody will show you our form library, but we also have manager and employee guidance within our form templates, which are great. So it ensures that both the employee and manager are really, really aware of what is this conversation about, what are we looking to achieve, and what are the outcomes. So again, it's just that simple, not too much text that it's overwhelming or people might just skim it, but just ensuring that both the employee and manager know why we're sitting down, why we're having this conversation, and ensuring that we're having the right the right questions are being presented to the employee to get the most out of that touch point.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Em.
Cool. So
Ros,
this one
for you.
Yeah. This one is, it sounds quite obvious, but it's also quite easy to forget, I think, when you're actually doing it. So it's, you might spend put a lot of effort into designing a whole new process. You're super happy with it. You've got done all the things we've said already, and people start using it and they're super engaged and you're really happy with it, and it's all very exciting and positive. But then this can really kind of let you down if you don't kind of follow up on everything that you're gathering as part of the process. So you're probably getting a lot of data from it, whether like from all of employees and managers' conversations, all their feedback, all their responses to any of those questions that you're asking. And they might be requesting, training courses or suggestions on improving the company or concerns or things around their well-being. There's going to be so much kind of data that's in there. And if you kind of don't follow up on that, then again, we often, it's very easy for employees to then get disengaged. Like the first round of reviews, the kind of first 6 months, maybe after you've launched this new process, they're all really engaged, and there's a lot of kind of hope and excitement around things. And then once they see that maybe nothing's actually getting followed up on, or everything they're saying doesn't feel like it's being kind of listened to and acknowledged, then it will obviously kind of disengagement will happen again very quickly, and then it's really hard to come back from. So this is quite a nice, like, kind of easy win almost, to just like, if you make sure you're doing this, and then it will continue being a positive experience for people, I think.
Absolutely. There's sort of gold in there, I think, isn't there? And if you can create a sort of feedback loop from what people are putting in and saying and summarizing in their reviews and their one-to-ones, and then that goes through to HR or a committee, perhaps, the champions, who then get to analyze it, see the trends, and then feed that back to the managers and the employees. It's really powerful, because it helps you with that kind of evolution of the process that we talked about earlier. You can show that you're responding, and that it just really shows that it's important that these conversations really matter, and that you're really expecting them to be high quality and productive, and not just a tick box exercise. And so having a look at that data can be instrumental. Obviously, if you're also capturing quantitative data, you can do all sorts of things. You can kind of reach all sorts of interesting strategic conclusions as well, helps you make strategic decisions about whether or not you've got an area of risk down here in the organization with succession, or you've got an opportunity over here because we've got a lot of very talented potential leaders over there. You know, being able to kind of move to that sort of way of thinking for most people in HR is extremely desirable. You know, it's what you want to be doing. You don't want to be doing the kind of chasing people up. You want to be presenting ideas to a board about, you know, shifts in strategy and stuff like that. And so that's really where the data comes in handy. But you do have to have good quality data, obviously, to be able to do that. Okay.
Yes, and lastly, so the number one mistake on our list is not knowing what outcomes or value you want to get out of your performance management process. So having those clear objectives of what are we looking to achieve is paramount, and then ensuring that you can then communicate that to the SLT, to your own team who will be supporting you and evolving and implementing the process. But then you can then ensure that you're reiterating that to the wider business. So I've just there's some crucial questions to sort of question the sort of purpose as to why you're implementing the process, such as why are we doing this? What outcomes are we aiming for? What value should it deliver to both the business and employees? And then how will it support our overall organizational goals? And then just by clarifying this as a whole, it's very, very easy for you to then communicate that to everyone, ensuring that when you are speaking with marketing, you can get those clear in your comms, and then post launch you can keep reiterating it. So just really focusing on what are we actually looking to achieve is quite important, because we can see that clients come to us but they're very unsure as to what they're looking to. What are the outcomes? They just know that they need to implement something, but they haven't really gone down into the nitty gritty to think, but what does it mean to us as an organization? What does it mean to our employees? What benefits and value are they going to get from this, to then ensure that there's engagement, that you're getting the data that you need, and then you can be proactive in the business as a whole. So I just think having really clear objectives as a team is super, super important, but then you can just trickle those down to the whole organization and keep sort of selling those benefits. And if you have a clear idea on what outcomes you're looking to achieve, it can just then streamline the process even more. And if something isn't quite working or isn't aligned to what you're looking to achieve, it's probably much easier for you to spot that and then make a change, just because there's that clear clarification as to what you're looking to get out of the performance management process.
I think it's also important to keep revisiting it. So like everything Emily just said is, you know, it's sometimes easier to maybe do initially, like as part of you initially kind of looking at your process, reevaluating it, and then making those decisions early on. But it's also about kind of coming back to it and not just kind of deciding once and then being like, okay, we're sorted now, and then not looking at it again for years. And just to keep regularly asking, you know, are we still on track? Are we delivering what we set out to do? Do we need to adjust anything again? You know, and keep letting that guide your evolution of the process.
I have quite a few clients who we call it with my clients revamping your performance management process. And I have clients who then contact me and say, actually, we've had a shift in organizational structure. We've had a change in our organizational goals. We've now changed a 5-year plan rather than 3-year plan. Or we've had some feedback from our teams, and we sit down and almost reevaluate what you're looking to achieve, and then we as a CS team support you in that change and ensure that that has then been sort of implemented, due to, as Roz says, it's always great to look back at it and see what's shifted, what's changed, what do we need to change, what's changed, and then move ahead with that.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. So we've reached the end of our top 10. There are questions and there's more to present, so I'm going to move on rapidly, if that's all right. Okay, so we don't run out of time. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask everyone a quick poll. So which of those 10 do you prefer, or which do you relate to the most? So do, tick anything that applies. I'd love to know, yeah, what you all think and what are the big challenges that you're facing. So do have a look at that, and it should be on your screen now. Just wait for those to come in. And I think I don't know if you can see this, but what we're starting to see, I think, is we've just had a change in the order. Yeah, okay, number one is not knowing what you want your process to achieve. Ros, thanks for your little summary just on that point then, because that's obviously kind of the one that's kind of pressing the most buttons. I completely understand that, and it actually relates to one of the questions that we've got that I will come to shortly as well. So we'll come back to that point if we've got time. Okay, now a couple of other things I wanted to point out is that in July we will be doing a webinar on how to roll out a new performance management system. Okay, so if you do decide to go online with Appraised or something else, then that might be that's a very kind of practical one about, you know, we'll probably cover the communication, how you kind of position it correctly so that it lands well. So do keep a lookout for that. But this one, we don't want to be salesy at all. We love the HR Ninjas community. We don't, you know, we're hoping to just kind of add useful value, and hopefully we come across as people who, you know, are experienced and that you can benefit from that. But we really would actually love any feedback. So if you would like anything else or anything more specific, then please do let us know. And I'm on LinkedIn. Obviously, you can connect to me and send stuff to me. I'm also on Facebook. So if you are using HR Ninjas and you just want to send me a message, please do. I think there might in the chat be a link that you can click on to register for that July webinar. So have a look at that. Okay, I'm going to move on now. And oopsie, wrong way. Form library. So we have set up, and if you're an HR Ninjas, I'm sure you'll see the link there already. But we've created this form library because we know that a lot of people just, when they're faced with a blank sheet of paper, especially around that question, like what do we want to achieve? It can be really hard. And so we've created this library of templates that we know are pretty useful. We'll give you a really good head start, and they'll give you some ideas, and you say, okay, well, yes, that's interesting. Probably not that. That's not right for us. So you can just go through and have a look at that. And we have put the link to that in the chat. So I'm not going to demo it now because I think we will run out of time. But please do have a look at that. With the feedback that we've had so far, said it's a really, really useful resource. You know, we've got templates for regular check-ins and one-to-ones. We've got templates for those slightly more reflective moments at the end of the year or mid-year or quarterly or whatever. We've got stuff there around talent development and succession planning and these other life cycle events. So that's all the way from day one or week one, you know, your week one review, then your 30-day review, 60, 90, probation, all of that, coming back to work, leaving the organization, and promotion. You know, there's all sorts of templates there. And I think, yeah, the feedback that we've had so far has been really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I would like to ask you, would you like to know anything else about Appraised? We are going to come on and I'm going to tackle the Q&A in a minute. But it would be great just to put this up on the screen and just see if there's anything. If anyone would like to learn more, please just use this. You can just tick one of the boxes and we'll get in touch with you. Simple as that. So I'll leave that there for the moment, and I'm going to move on to the Q&A. Okay, we've got a few minutes left, so let's have a look at that. Get rid of that. Okay. I'm going to pick these sort of more or less at random. This is a good one to start off with, from Julia. When you are talking about the appraisal process, are you talking about an annual activity or something continuous? Our view is that almost every organization should be moving to a continuous performance management process where you are having regular, little and often, conversations with your manager about how you're doing. And it's really, you know, that is by far the best way to do it, because otherwise, you know, they're just the kind of once a year appraisal. Nobody likes it because you just can't remember what's happened over the year. You're getting the feedback that you really need too late to be able to do anything about it, and it feels like you're just sort of being assessed. And yeah, so most organizations that we work with are making that move from the kind of old school once a year or twice a year to something more continuous and fluid. That's not to say, though, that they are abandoning an end year review at all. And I actually personally think that the best thing is to do both, because you do your regular one-to-ones, you update your objectives once a month, you give and receive feedback every now and then, you give some recognition to whoever it's due all the time, and you've got this conversation going on across the organization, and that's great. However, it is nice also to be able to step back and say, with your manager, or for your manager to say, look, I'm looking at the feedback you got 6 months ago through this system, and back then I can remember now that you were really worried about this. You felt like you weren't delivering, you weren't capable of doing this. Fast forward 3 months, 4 months, 6 months now to your year-end review, and we can now see that you're getting really positive feedback about that. And if you don't have that reflective period, it's quite easy to forget or not realize what has happened over that time and how far somebody has come. And I think it's really important, even if that's what the conversation is just about, saying, look, this is the progress that you have made. Let's think now about what you could do over the next year. So I like the combination of those. There's another question, which is how do clients ensure that their processes meet the needs of neurodivergent employees? I'm going to ask Emily and Roz about this in a second to see if you've come across anything like this, but it's a really good question. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it justice, to be honest. But one thing I do know is that our system has been designed to accessibility standards, and accessibility means not just people with physical impairments, like, you know, visibility. You know, we want everybody to be able to access our system and use it, but it also considers neurodivergent people and how they process data. So we do have that. It is kind of part of our system. It's part of our design process. But I was just wondering, Ros and Emily, you know, the answer may well be no, but have you heard anything from a customer about anything to consider neurodivergent employees?
Yeah, I had a client recently actually who was involving, I get kind of doing like I think I mentioned, like getting together a little group of employees across the company to get feedback from them specifically. Like they were basically setting up the new process. They were using our system and they hadn't launched yet, but they wanted to gather feedback from a group of people, but just on kind of what they were thinking and how they were setting up the process and the reviews and the kind of format of everything. And they involved a lot of their neurodivergent employees in that group because they wanted to hear about like their experience of how they'd set it up, so that they could really take that into consideration. And so a lot of the feedback that we got was kind of specifically from that perspective and different perspectives within that. And we made a lot of tweaks that were just kind of like more specific. Like Rowley said, obviously that the kind of system generally is accessible, but kind of very specific things about like the, you know, the color backgrounds of some things, like maybe from a branding perspective we'd set up, but then people were saying it, you know, it wasn't super easy to use. And so we kind of made some tweaks based on that. So I think that works quite well.
Yeah, but totally understand. It's more than just the system, the process itself. You want it to help people shine and you know, really understand what contribution people can make. And you want to make sure that the process brings that out and doesn't, you know, cover it up. So one more question I'm going to just answer very quickly. Sadly, I don't think we've got time for another, but Joe asks, what do we do if managers are not engaging with the process at all? So do you have any advice for getting them involved in doing reviews and giving feedback? My view is that if you can get managers involved in the design of the process, that can be really helpful. Get them a handful in a room and say, right, what do you care about from your people? How are you going to help people get the results that you want as a manager? How are you going to achieve your goals as a manager? What sort of conversations should you be having with them? And get them to answer this, and you know, you start to form an idea of what really matters to the managers, and then they will support it.
I had it with a client who we were during the onboarding process, and I joined a management meeting. So all their senior managers and middle management were in this meeting. We spoke about what we currently set up, but obviously open to questions and change. So it was just really, really beneficial for them to see what was there. But yeah, they had a voice. And so when we were doing the training, or when we launched, the engagement was extremely high. And so the trickle down was fantastic. So all their teams are using it because management truly see the benefit, because they were partaking in the development of the process itself.
Fantastic. Right. I'm going to finish off with a couple of takeaway gifts. So we have this performance review toolkit, which will contain these mistakes in there, you know, with plenty of detail, objections from managers, which sort of quite nicely answers that question that we were just talking about. What are the, I think we've got like top 10 objections and how to deal with them. So you can just, you can either scan that QR code on the screen, or if you have a look, I think Katerina has put into the chat the link there, so you can just download it straight away. So I hope you find that useful. And we also have a slide here where you can see other ways that you can get in touch with us. So you can scan these QR codes and get in touch. You could either, you know, we could show you around, give you a little demo if you want to see it. You could do a trial, just a little play around with a kind of demo account, or go and follow us on LinkedIn. But I hope we will hear from you again in due course. And yeah, like I said, we've got that other webinar coming up in July. And as I said earlier, we'd love to get any feedback, because we do the webinars and we, you know, we just hope that they're useful and informative. We certainly enjoy doing it, but any feedback would be much appreciated. So I think that's it from us. And yeah, thank you, Rosalind, and thanks, Emily, for joining me today. It's been fantastic to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Yeah, it's been fun.
Great. All right then. Thanks. Bye.
Everyone, thank you
Bye,
so
everyone.
much. Bye.
Have a good day.